Thank you. Okay, good. That's my initials. This is somebody called for a radical alternative. I did this 20-some years ago for a book I did called Information Anxiety. My name is Richard Saul Wurman. I said that. I did this for information anxiety. And this was a suggestion that the cover of a newspaper, that we had newspapers then, and it can be driven by that everything takes place someplace. And it can be driven by just certain maps every day, a changing order of maps. The maps would change every day based on the headlines and the articles, and that's the way of finding things. That it's an organizing principle of finding things. That it's both the summary of the news, the summary of all the headlines is in there, and that everything takes place someplace. Just think about your world. Think about your life. Think about what you're doing. And think about when you start reading a story, and think of the anchoring principle of being someplace. So there is a subtext to some of what I'm going to talk about cartography. I love fucking maps. I just love maps. And I love what they do, and I love what they represent. So that's just that. Well, delay. Oh, here it is. MAP. Mankind's ability to perceive. It's the fundamental ordered way we have graphics. A good map works. It's the way we perceive things. You can map the human body. You slice me in half. It's a map of my body. If you show how a business does over a series of years, it's a map of how the business does. It's a very broad definition of what cartography is. This is www.urbanobservatory.org/preview. It's a free web application, and it's the access to I'd love you to look at it. It's the comparative analysis of cities. No two cities in the world do their maps to the same scale or with the same legends. I know you think that Google Earth does this. It doesn't. You couldn't put 3 cities up and compare them. You can't see land use. You can't see information. It's only GIS mapping, Esri mapping, that you can have information on. And this takes, we're now up to about 78 or 90 cities. We'll probably have 1,000 cities in which we've taken their information, translated into the same scale, the same form, the same legends. For instance, if you have a city, one city could call an airport commercial, another could call it open space, another could call it transportation. You can't get any comparison of things. And people collect their population information in a different way, their healthcare information in a different way. There's no way of having, if I was speaking Finnish and you didn't understand Finnish, you wouldn't understand anything I'm saying now. Okay? You have to have a common language. In medicine, what happens if 2 surgeons, one does the metric system, one the English system, when they cut you open? I mean, you need a common language. Physicists do not have I did a conference called WWW, and one part of it, I had an astrophysicist from CERN, and I had the guy who was in charge of the Juno mission, the one that goes to Jupiter. And I said to them, to begin their conversation, I said, you both have a different definition of the word elegance. You know, elegance is a term in physics. And you both look at the periodic table differently, where the astrophysicist only cares about helium and hydrogen, and the other one not only cares about every one of the elements, but wants to create more. That you're both physicists and you don't talk the same language. That is true across the board in things. And you think you're talking the language of the people who are reading and looking at your things, and it is often not a common language. So, where am I looking that I know something's up? There's a big delay when I'm pushing buttons.
Yeah.
I guess I should think it's magical, it comes on at all, but the delay kills me. I'm pushing it twice. Well, I guess I have to push twice. This shows you sort of what it looks like. You can have touch screens, and if you make one larger, the other one gets larger. All the scale goes. You can take any 3 cities, and you can take in any one of 23 different layers. It's all live off of the cloud, and some of it is live information with when it has to do with sound and air quality and traffic. And we'll have more and more things. We're just starting. This is the beginning project I'm doing with Jack Dangerman, and who owns Esri, and John Kamen, who owns Radical Media. And the 3 of us are putting this together. So it's just fun to play with. You all should each have one. They're fun. And it's all free, and it's off the cloud. All right, I'm pushing the button again. That shows you what one of the things look like. That's some of the stills of it. And then we're doing an exhibit. I'll go through this real fast because this is, come on. I am trying to speed it up for you guys, honestly. These are things that I come up with bon mots. You'll see that later on. I love to talk in clever terms. And so they make a poster of whatever I say. And a fundamental principle of mine now, and I think you should run a political campaign on, is that understanding precedes action. On the other side of the poster are some models of cities all done to the same scale, look like sand models or clay models. I did those in 1962. Some of you were not adults at that time. The next one on top, that's from the Urban Atlas I did in 1965 for MIT. It's a long time ago. It was the first comparative statistical atlas of major American cities. And then this is the Urban Observatory and some of the things off of that. That one series of images happens to be the exits off of the major road systems of major cities in the world. And it's really fascinating when you look at it and how the cities are formed. But this they've then overlaid, Esri has overlaid, they own Landsat too, and they overlaid Landsat images of different spectrums over it, and they match perfectly, and they look wonderful. These maps done in 1962 with some students in North Carolina still hold up, and they were the right scale, and they look pretty good. It was fun. And 1920-21 is the overriding project, which is about 19 cities that will have more than 20 million people in the 21st century. It's a clever title. We're not really doing that. And that's it. Me, John Kamen, Jack Dangerman. And you all know Esri. Most of you should know Radical Media. Radical Media did Fog of War. They have a lot of Academy Awards and stuff like that. They're really top notch. That's that thing. Okay, now something else is supposed to come up. Is this the film? If there's no music, then we're dead in the water. Please tell me there's music. There's no sound? Oh, okay, it's over.
It's not going to work without sound.
No, it doesn't work without sound. We have to cut it. Can somebody try to fix the sound while we talk? Did somebody say yes? Is there somebody in charge who can tell me that somebody's going to work on the sound while we're talking? They're working on it. Okay. All right, we'll turn it off now, though. I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
Press the red button.
Should do it.
Okay. Oh, my goodness. Well, Chris worked on the beginning of some of the stuff, created some of the maps of 1920-21 when we were first trying to test it for whether it was an idea that held water, and you did about 20 cities of plans where we just looked at the gross form characteristics of the city when she was at National G with Alan Carroll.
Yeah.
So that brings forth the loop from last night that we were at National G last night. My interest, or what I embrace basically, or what I've tried to have as a path in my life, is to be the dumbest person in the room. I really like to suck out information from everybody else, and I listen to every word everybody says. And it's unsettling because sometimes the words are really stupid, and they're inaccurate. And some speakers are stupid and inaccurate. Just because you're on the stage doesn't mean you have any way to the truth. But I do listen to things, and I'm really obsessed with how stupid I am. And basically, that's what the beginning of that film says. I mean, it starts off really, I'm almost in a rant of braggadocio saying that I am the most powerful person in the room because I'm more in touch with my ignorance than you're in touch with your ignorance. And that makes me more powerful. And that you can't even get to where I am because I've worked at it for my whole life. And that it's really a job to wipe your head clean. It's really hard to start everything being dumb. And embrace that. And embrace it in everything you do. But it's been a great gift to me because I'm such a schlepper to begin with. that, that I know nothing. I'm not expert in anything. You see, I can't even use those things. I can't even give instructions that people understand when I say turn off lights. Somehow that's not coherent. But I try. And so I've tried each way that I can make things understandable based on working alone, because I'm abrasive, though charming, but I'm abrasive. And therefore, I've been fired from every job I've had in my life. I've been fired as dean of a school, fired from offices. I only had 2 jobs, one with Lou Kahn and one with Charlie Eames, that I wasn't fired from. But everything else was a total failure for me. And so I just work by myself as a recluse, and Nigel will tell you that, and John Grimwade and a few people, and you will tell me. I just live in a house up in Newport, and I get some things done. So I've done some conferences, and I've done about 90 books. I don't have a publisher. I don't have a distributor. I let them all go out of print, and I grind them up. I have no desire to do anything but just figure out things that interest me. That my definition of learning is remembering what you're interested in. Now that sounds really glib, but then try to fault it. If you don't remember it, did you learn it? No. Did you really remember anything you weren't interested in? No. You probably did some courses you did very well in school you weren't interested in, and you forgot them. We're all based on testing, throwing it up, regurgitating it, and forgetting it. Short-term memory. We're all gin rummy memory people. We take tests and we forget it. That's all we do. It's the stupidest educational system in the world, everywhere. It just doesn't make any sense at all. Because you can shout out any subject and you connect that subject to everything else in the world. Everything connects to everything, and it's based on your interest. And we should have not teachers, but guides that take us through and that's the way we should do our work. We should guide ourselves through what interests us and make those connections, because that's the way other people will see it. And I'm the perfect person to do it because I start everything so stupid. So I don't forget to get you in the front door. And we've all had teachers who were very smart. We know they're smart. We know they're bright. They can read hard books. But we're lost because they don't start at the beginning. And we never quite get into the subject. And that's what you have to do. You have to take people in. Where is someplace? You get off a plane in a city you've never been. And I'm full of anxiety. I don't know where I am. I don't know how far it is to where I'm going. I want somebody with my name on it there and a gate and holds my hand. Doesn't that feel good? You've had that happen to you, some of you. They have your name, and they're going to take you so you get into that city. Just think of what that personal attention, where you can then ask somebody, how far is it? What am I going to pass? Everything that just gets rid of that stuff so you can get at the heart of what you want to think about. So I've done about 90 books, and they're on lots of subjects, a lot of books on medicine, on sports, 30 guidebooks to cities, lots of atlases, couple fables. I don't know. Nigel works on half of them. And the good parts of them. He'll tell you. And that's the quest in each book. And each of the subjects, particularly medicine, is really fascinating because I'm not a doctor, and I never use any doctors in the books. I don't use experts because they can't explain it to me. My doctor can't answer a fucking question I ask him, and he doesn't tell me anything that I can understand, So why use experts? There's a great joke, I think it's a great joke, by Emo Phillips. That's before all your time. Nobody here knows Emo Phillips, but he used to do specials, and he's a good comedian. He's sort of going to pot now, but he's not really pot, but he's going to. And but he had a joke. He said, for a long time, he had a squeaky voice, and he wore his hair in a page boy, and he weighed about 8 pounds, and he was about 6'4". And he said, for years and years and years, I thought my brain was the most important organ of my body. Until one day I thought, look who's telling me that. Think about that. Look who's telling us all the information we get. My car doesn't work. Where do you go? You go to the guy who will tell you what he needs to tell you to make money. And the doctor wants to operate. And the dentist wants new teeth. Everybody we're working on is the possibility for total scam. And we live in a life of scam. Every part of it. Now I think, oh, he's an old guy. I'm 80. I'm old. I'm the oldest person in the room. Is there anybody older than 80? Ha! So, it's not a paranoia that I'm saying, it's reality. It is reality. And we don't question it because there's a bunch of shamans out there. And everybody probably in this room has as their worst nightmare directions, instructions, and orders from an incoherent superior. An irrational, incoherent superior. And that is the worst nightmare that we have every day. That is what takes the joy out of our life. The incoherence of superiors. I don't know where they are all born or what happens to people that at a certain point when they get the ability to tell somebody what to do, they do it in an incoherent manner. I've avoided that because nobody ever asks me to do anything, so I don't work for anybody and I have no clients. And I've avoided it by accepting failure. And I have failed a lot, but it's my failure. And I find it much easier to fail than sit in a committee meeting. I think nothing is really worse than a committee meeting or listening to a boring talk. And in about a minute or so, I think I'll stop talking and say, if anybody is not interested in what I'm saying, why don't you you can leave with dignity and then I'll get back to talking again. Because I don't believe anybody should have to sit and listen to shit from the stage. I have run so many conferences. You know, I created the TED conference, and I ran that for 18 years. And I created another one called TED Med, and I ran that since 1995, and then I got rid of that. Then I ran EG. I did it once. It was so good, and it was so self-indulgent, I just gave it away. And then I ran one a year ago or a year and a half ago called WWW. Best conference I ever did, just the best one. I said, no presentations, no slides, none of this stuff, nothing can go wrong. I got two people like these two physicists, but I also got Yo-Yo Ma and Herbie Hancock, Quincy Jones, and Frank Gehry, and E.O. Wilson, the best biologist in the world, and the best storm chaser in the world, and Julie Taymor and David Blaine, the best magician in the world. I got 50 people, and I paired them two at a time, Jeffrey Katzenberg and Norman Lear, and all those people. And they know who they're going to be paired with, and they sat facing each other, not the audience. I started them with something I just told you about the physicist. It wasn't a question. I just said, this is what you think, and then they started talking. And it was a celebration of conversation. And it was me discovering, by sitting there for a couple days, 2.5 days, little hints at the structure of what conversation is. What a gift conversation is. We come up with ideas in conversation. We think of things and we can see and explore the translation of those conversations into words, into visuals, into combination of words and visuals, into real-time things. It's an amazing adventure. But it comes from us talking and listening to each other. So this was a great experience. I called it WWW because there's so many things that interest me that start with W, including my name. And it was the best conference I ever ran. It was just extraordinary. Next week, on Wednesday, this will be the first time and only time I ever talk about this, because it's not announced. You can't Google it. It's not there. There's no press coming. But I decided, since I was just 80, that I should celebrate to myself, just an indulgent thing for myself, I try to emphasize that because everybody's holier than thou when they get on stage. That what allowed me this passage, this rite of passage from being a schlepper. My father made cigars. My mother's family were very poor, really poor kosher butchers. I don't think ever learned to read English. Nobody went to college. I have no background in anything I do. I'm an architect. I'm not trained in graphic design. I certainly don't. I'm not trained in writing. I can't write. I can't type. I dictate everything. I just tell stories to something that records it. I don't know how to do anything. I mean, you see, I don't know how to work buttons. But I thought, what can I do that's even less than what I did at WWW? So I picked up the phone. This is 4 weeks ago, maybe 5 weeks ago. And I called up 4 friends who mean something to me. And that their story really, really means something to me. I am envious of all of them. Now, I know that's a bad thing to say. You're green with envy. No, envy is admiration. I'm jealous of them. They're amazing people. And I thought, why don't we just sit down and talk about, did our fathers do this to us? Our mothers? What do we envy? What do we admire? What is it? Not talk about our work. And then just by happenstance get maybe 20 people to come. But not announce it. And give them just 4 days to say they're coming or not. And I got a big, huge space. Well, it's at least as big as this and 3 times higher in an old brick building that used to be the power station in Newport, Rhode Island. Huge, which is now used by their turn of the century building. Not the last, turn of the 20th century building. It's used as a school for the Restoration Society, restoring boats. And the first year, each of the 12 students builds a sailboat, and they steam the wood. They build it the way you'd build it 150 years ago. It's a brilliant thing. So the room now, because they're going to be graduating in June, is filled with these boats all around, around the sides. And they will take out stuff from the middle, and we're just going to sit in a circle with our backs to the audience, which is symbolic, that we're looking at each other. And so I called up Yo-Yo Ma, Frank Gehry, Moshe Safdie, and John Kamen, and myself. The 5 of us are going to sit and just talk to each other for about an hour and a half and drink wine. I have a lot of good Chapelet wine because Molly Chapelet has a friend, and she gave me a lot of good wine. And we're just going to sit, and then I like pecans. My housekeeper makes wonderful pecans with a little spice and sugar on them. I really like them, and some nice peanuts. Peanuts are very healthy for you. So I have bowls of peanuts, but full of nuts, which is an interesting word. And see, if you look at that word eat, E-A-T, envy, admiration, and terror. Eat. And just talk about that shit. Talk about the vulnerability of what we do. Why do we keep on doing it? Each of these people are still doing things, ambitious. I started off, I got a date from Yo-Yo, which was the 15th, and so when I wrote to everybody, I said, the date of April 15th means nothing. It's the only date that Yo-Yo had free. I'm glad he works 364 days of the year, and I hope he gets a good day rate. And then everybody else came, And I'm terrified. I'm also intrigued with what will happen and how vulnerable each of us can be. How can we learn about some patterns that affect how we think and why we do anything? And I assure you it's not to save the world. I think it's to solve some puzzle, solve something we don't know how to handle, that we're trying to work out, that will affect people, but the primary thing is the effect it has on the creative spirit, the creation of the thing themselves. And so I'm going to do that next week. It'll come and it'll go, and you'll never hear about it. This is all that will ever be said. Well, why don't you do this? And so people can, I'm not interested in that. And I know in the Orient, when you're 80, you can say whatever's on your mind. I've been doing it for longer than that. Jokes, I told you a joke. Jokes are really fascinating because the punchline of a joke is the opposite of expectation, and we laugh. Now think of what that structure of that means. It's a radical alternative. And what is the creative act when you really break through and have something? It's a radical alternative, often the opposite of something that you're thinking. The creation of a joke, the structure of that is astonishing. It's hard. That's a real hard job, stand-up comic. Really hard to go through a routine of twisting your mind and an experience and a story so you can see another version of it that is so different that it makes you laugh. But the whole notion of opposites in creative activities is wonderful. Niels Bohr, who some of you will know about, most of you won't, probably the third greatest physicist of the last century, said when he has a profound, this is paraphrasing, when he has a profound thought, he realizes that the opposite of it is also profound. And I find that interesting. And when I work on things, I clearly think of the opposite of things. And I think of the nothingness of things. This will sound woo-woo and sort of Zen, but it isn't. 1955, I find myself in my first trip to Europe, 10 years after the war, so it was still a shaky time in Europe. And I come in at the station, and they won't let you in the city because there's not many hotel rooms unless you really get one from somebody, and you tell them what you can spend, which at that point was nothing. I was camping with some friends, and I knew you couldn't camp, and we had to get a room. And we get to the room, three of us in one room, and all we wanted to do was go out and go and see Piazza San Marco. And we drop our bags, run down, and it's not hard to find Piazza San Marco. And I come to the arches at the far end of the plaza away from the Duomo, and I look out the arches, and I see nothing. And I realized the astonishing power of nothing. Napoleon didn't go and put himself on a horse in a statue in the middle of the square. There's nothing there. And how astonishing, filling up that nothing in a different way every minute, whether it's mostly pigeons or mostly people, or mostly music or a mixture of all three. The nothingness is astonishing. And the nothingness of a space can be astonishing. And the nothingness of things not said can be astonishing. And the space between the notes can be more important than the notes themselves. And it's the timing of a conversation and the editing of a movie and all the things that make up each thing are just all equally just a wonder to me. Lucan said, I did the first book on Lou when I was 26 years old. I don't know why he allowed me to do it, but he did. No, he wouldn't let anybody do a book. And it was my first book. And he said, no, you can do it. What's it going to be? And I told him what it was going to be. He said, that's fine. And it's going to just some of his words and some of his drawings. And in the end of the book, the last quote was, Lou, this is a paraphrase, of looking at his work and looking at his life and sort of saying, so I looked at wonder, and another W word. I looked at wonder, and I asked wonder, how am I doing, wonder? The personification of words, of objects. When Lou said he asked a brick what a brick wants to be, he had a conversation with a brick, conversation with a piece of steel, a conversation with the existence will of a building, a conversation with what a book wants to be, the personification, the anthropomorphizing of an object, so that it becomes equal with you and a conversation you can have with it. And once again, the idea of conversation and what it means, and reaction and non-reaction. And the reaction can be silence, but in your brain you hear words, is amazing to me. And it's the information architecture of my life. And it is the passion in my life. And it's actually only wanting to be with obsessive people. What is nicer than Nigel's obsession with blue? Is he not more wonderful because he drives a blue car and has blue shoes and blue socks? I once gave him a pair of blue shoes, and I thought that was the perfect present. I liked it. It was fun doing it. It made me more with him, akin to him, and I understand it, and it's not crazy. I wear rubber shoes. I like rubber shoes. I wear rubber shoes when I'm supposed to be dressed in black tie. I wear rubber shoes. I did a book on healthcare, and the whole book was I was getting older. I was about 75, about 5 years ago, I guess I did it. It was about 5 years ago, I think. And I did it because I didn't understand. I realized there was a healthcare system. I didn't understand it at all. I didn't understand anything. I didn't know how to find out about things. Later on in this speech, if somebody wants to come up and explain Obamacare to the room, I'll let them do that. I mean, you understand nobody can explain that to this audience. Although you've all written about it and done stories about it and diagrams about it, and it's been probably more inches written about it in the press in the last 3 years than anything else. And we can't explain it to each other at all. I mean, that's really creepy. There's something fundamentally odd about that, to have things that we're so bound up with and we have opinions on, for and against it. I think if we took a vote here, how many people are for it and how many people are against it, we'd get people having a reaction. And then you ask them to explain what they're reacting to, for or against it. And they wouldn't be able to explain it. And the people operating it can't explain it. And most things around us can't be explained. And we don't demand it. There's lots of secretaries in the cabinet, but there's no secretary of understanding. There's nobody there that makes what people come up with understandable to others.
It's intentionally confusing.
Well,
sometimes.
That's the
Sometimes.
That's the aspect of it that you think that there's a plot, that people make things that way. And maybe there is. I choose just to believe it's our basic training.
Inability to explain things clearly.
No, it's our inability that it's not a sociological ideal. That if somebody comes up to you, if you come up to me, you say, well, how's everything going? How's everything? Well, that question in itself is a lie. Because I couldn't possibly answer it, and therefore you don't even really want to know what I answer you. How is everything going? How's it going? Keeping busy. Those are all lies. Because you can't answer them, and you've all done it to each other. You've all mentioned to each other, I'll suspect, or you will, in the last night, today, and tomorrow, you will mention to somebody a person, or a piece of work, or a book, or a reference, or a movie. You'll mention it to somebody and they'll go, uh-huh, and they don't know what the hell you're talking about. I created a conference that's still going on. I don't have anything to do with it, called the Business Information Factory, so they use the term BIF as their title. It's in Providence, Rhode Island. It's a perfectly nice conference. It's okay. I spoke at it for 10 years. I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm I'm going to stop talking in a little while. And they have big, a la TED, they have big three-dimensional letters on stage, BIF. And last year I went up to give a talk, and I went up on stage and I sort of looked around, and I went up and I changed the letters so they spelled fib. And I talked about lying. I talked about how the speaker before me, the one before him, the one that comes after me are going to be up there lying to you. Because we're all lying. We're all telling lies to each other. You know, we're making things seem nicer, seeming worse, we're exaggerating, we're just not telling the truth. That's not part of our modus operandi, to really tell the truth, to really understand the truth, to question things being truthful or not. I used to play a game when I gave speeches. I used to take New York Times, which was the newspaper of record, and I would just take whatever today's Times was, and I'd say to somebody, pick out a story on the front page, any story, and I'm going to ask you the three simplest questions about the story, and you'll find it's not in the story. And it worked every time. I mean, and I wasn't loaded. It was just that day's paper, and my questions were really simple. You know, like, well, where did it take place? You know, how many people were involved? What are just that level of questions. I mean, that level of questions, and they're just not covered. Because the people writing all this stuff have the disease of familiarity. They're so familiar with what they're doing that they forget to bring you in with them. And often the graphics are so familiar. And the terms that are used are so familiar. By the way, that was a sigmoid curve, not an S curve. I'm doing a book now which surprises me. I wasn't going to do it. My last book was called 33. And it was called 33 because I published it as a sequel to a book I had done 33 years before. That's the only reason it was called 33. But then it ended up having 33 chapters, which were an outline of a 33-part series of a TV series. And it was a pretty good book. I liked the book. I don't like most of my books. And I wasn't going to do anything else, and I came up with this idea. I realized that I'm Jewish, but I'm an atheist. I mean, I don't believe in God. That I sort of believed in understanding. And so I thought I'd do a book called Worship the God of Understanding. And I'd create my religion. But it didn't turn out to be that. That as I started doing it, if you would see this film someday, you will see one part of it. I came up in information anxiety. There's only 5 ways of organizing information. Latch. Some of you might have heard the Latch theory. There's location, alphabet, time, category, and hierarchy. And there's 5 ways of innovation called a nose. Addition, need, opposite, subtraction, and epiphany. I can go in. That's a whole speech about both of those. So I thought, well, maybe there's a finite numbers of ways of understanding things. You know, how do we understand things? 2 of my books are 3 books. Understanding USA, Understanding Children, Understanding Healthcare. I use the word a lot. And as I started getting into the subject, I realized there's lots of ways of understanding. And I was talking to somebody, and we got into this, the head of the Santa Fe Institute, very smart man, Jeffrey West, who has a theory of approximation, which is a wonderful theory of approximation, which he backs up with enormously deep research. That there's a lot of patterns that go right around 80% of things happening, of growth of things. You ought to look into it. Jeffrey West is a remarkable man. And I said, for instance, understanding, I understand Atlantic City because when I was 10 years old, 11 years old, I used to play Monopoly. And that I still remember all the probably Park Place. I remember all the places, all the railroads that came into it. And he said, you know, I'm a Brit. He says, I learned about the places in London through playing the Monopoly in London. So then I called up a friend of mine by the name of Alan Hassenfeld, who happens to own Hasbro, who happens to own Parker Brothers. And I said, so Alan, how many boards are there? He says, there's hundreds and hundreds. I said, I need 40 of them. He said, just tell me the ones you want, and I'll send them to you. So there's going to be a chapter of 40 boards, Monopoly boards, as one way you can understand things, by playing a game. That would never find its way in an academic course. And Milton Glaser has this intellectual jazz that he does with Piero della Francesco and the style of his drawings. And he did a whole book that nobody's seen of drawings really improvising on Piero della Francesca as his way of understanding Piero della Francesca. And there'll be a chapter on that. And another friend of mine, Ben Fry, who first talked at TED, I got him on a wall phone at MIT when he was going there as a student, and I'd heard about that he was just an amazing kid. And he turns out to be just astonishing. Ben Fry. Look at his work. You ought to Google Ben Fry. And I didn't know there were 6 editions of Darwin. Darwin's book was 6 editions, and he has taken every sentence and diagrammed every sentence in all 6 editions and showed the changes he made, that Darwin made between editions, and what they mean between. It's a whole new way of understanding not only the first book of Darwin, but the changes that occurred in the man's rest of his life till he did the final version, which just before the ending has one sentence that mentions the possibility of a greater being. Crazy stuff. You never taught that. But what a different way of understanding Darwin. Nigel's going to do a chapter on water, on a book he worked with Rick Smolin. They should all have been collected in one part of the book, not spread through the book, but they're amazing, so we'll collect them all in a chapter in the new book. So the whole title of the book is Worship the God of Understanding and the Angels of Clarity and Transparency of Source. In other words, don't lie. I'll sell about 4 copies with that title. And it's now currently running around 1,600 pages. It's an anti-success exercise. But I am so excited by this book. I showed some of it to you today. I am learning so much, a whole new way of what understanding is and what are the different paths and how none of us know the way of understanding. There isn't a way of doing it. That it is a permission-giving book that you can develop patterns of how you can communicate to other people. And it's probably given me another year of life. I'll make it to 81. It's just fascinating to me. That'll be my last book. I did a book, which you would have seen that happened on the Olympics in '84, and I did it. These all come from my desire to know something. I hate crowds. And I like watching football on television. I don't know why you'd want to go to a football game. I don't know why you'd want to go to a movie theater. I mean, I don't know why you'd want to go to a crowded restaurant. I don't know why you'd want to have music when you eat. I don't understand anything. But I love the Olympics, but then I watch them on television, and then I can't stand the way they show them on television, because some of it is up front and personal with the defector or something. The wife of the defector, or the sister, or the personal story behind things, and I don't really give a damn. I really want to know, how do they score archery? How does it work? You never find out about they never tell you about most of the sports. I'm still trying to figure out soccer. I know football. I still don't. I watch it because everybody in the world watches it except Americans, but now Americans are starting to watch, so it's on television. I still don't know how it works. I taught at Cambridge, England, and I gave an assignment to one student who was on the cricket team that to explain to me, because you have a tutorial with a student for 1 hour. Every student, you have a tutorial with them for 1 hour, just individual, every week. And his task was to teach me to understand cricket, and he couldn't do it. I don't understand cricket. And then I realized how I really couldn't explain baseball to him. That somehow some things are very hard to explain because they're made up of so many exceptions. You know, try to explain the infield fly rule. Just try to do that to somebody. And maybe somebody don't even know what I'm talking about here. Anyway, so I did a book on the Olympics where I explained every sport in 2 pages, basically mostly 2 pages, some were 4 pages. And then I went to Hawaii because it was in LA. I was living in LA and I just didn't want to be with the crowds. So I rented my house, got money for that, did the book, and sold 3 million copies of the book. Actually, 3.2 million copies of the book. And it's a good book on the Olympics. And now I understand the sports. Thank God there's not cricket in the Olympics. So did he say that it was fixed and we have sound?
We have no sound.
How did we move from a little room there with a toilet in it that had sound to being on stage with all the wires and no sound?
We had sound when we first got on stage, too, so I don't know what happened there. It's unfortunate.
Okay, we don't have sound.
Okay.
Richard, can you just hold your lav mic up to the speaker of your laptop? Just take your lav mic and hold it on your laptop speaker.
Do you know what he's talking about?
Yeah, I don't know if it'll work, Carol, but
Well, I did that in class.
You did that in class.
Well, yeah, it's the only way to get it to work in my classroom.
Well, why don't you all come up here and help us?
That's what Chris is there, you know.
Get up off your ass, Good, and help us.
I need your lav mic.
Well, take it.
Well, then nobody will hear you. You have to be really loud.
you can take mine, because
Okay. Well, just, yeah, yours is
I'm
more-
happy to let Richard do all the talking, as you can see.
Thanks, Chris.
I got the point.
What am I turning on here? Oh,
See if we can still get it back.
this will be kind of fake sound. Hey,
Is Luke in here?
Felin.
I think it goes from,
It comes out here, right?
yeah.
We're gonna have to unplug it.
Comes out here, it sounds like a biology lesson.
Hello. This is not working either. Oh, there's a turn on button.
Just point it to your, you should turn it up back.
What's that?
It's on.
See, that's what they were going to have me do, right?
Let me get this video
Sure,
back. I don't
quick. Yeah, I'll do that. Good.
Richard, I totally meant to hijack this from you.
Well, you're losing the crowd. They're leaving.
Yeah.
They know it's not going to work.
And this goes to the audio. So if I unplug that, then it'll come out the speaker, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, that's what we're gonna do.
Well, he's fussing. Does anybody have one good question? Oh, here we go. I will tell you a story of why I'm the most powerful person in the table and more powerful than you. And that's because I more embrace my ignorance than you embrace yours. Even if I tell you about it, you can't get there because I've worked so hard to get there. I've worked so hard to be dumb and blank. I was the golden boy and I realized I knew nothing. My passion is the simple journey from not knowing to knowing. A map is a pattern made understandable. Mankind's ability to perceive is a map. My definition of architecture was this thoughtful making of space and place. So information architecture was trying to raise the bar. The organization of information actually creates new information. We're anxious about the fact that most stuff that we call information doesn't inform. The idea of TED was convergence. The It's Christmas morning for the mind. I'm a little Jew from Philadelphia. My father made cigars. Nobody went to college. I just wanted to meet the Pope. I strive to discover what it's like not to understand. How to understand what it's like not to understand. In a simple-minded way, I get up one morning, something is interesting to me, I don't understand it, I look for a book that would help me, I look for a TV show that would help me understand. If I find that, I'm satisfied. If I don't find that, I do a book or a conference or a meeting or something about it. It's just all generated by my curiosity. So how do I begin? I begin by going to a terrifying place. I go to this place of not knowing anything about the subject, of wiping my slate clean of anything I thought I knew. I have 3 labs, that's a labyrinth. Next step is, well then, how do I organize my thoughts? How do I organize what comes into me in this vacuous, airy space that I live? I came up with a notion called Latch 20-some years ago when I did a book called Information Anxiety. There's only 5 ways of organizing information: by location, alphabet, time, category, and hierarchy. The organization of information actually creates new information, and it changes the pattern of understanding. People made little animated films on Wurman's theory of Latch. Tashin just did a major book. What I'm saying is what I created non-scientifically 20 years ago has now become accepted as fact. And there it is, Latch. And I think, those sons of bitches stole my idea. Then this is all credit me for the idea. I don't think they made the type of my name large enough, but Latch. It helped me very much when I did my guidebook series. I had moved to LA and I couldn't find my way around, and there wasn't a good guidebook. So I decided to do my own guidebook. All guidebooks were organized by category, not by location. So they had a chapter on hotels, a chapter on restaurants, chapter on museums, chapter on the various categories of information. So by changing that in a radical way to organizing everything by location, you didn't have to ask the concierge, where can I eat close by? You could see where the red entries were, and they were restaurants. Where the black entries were, and they were museums. Where the blue entries were, and they were hotels. I reinvented the guidebook with those. They were a new way of thinking. I did San Francisco and Hawaii, London, Paris, Rome, New York City. And then I said, what's the hardest city, the most complex city that I know of? And that was Tokyo. People use this on their ads all over Tokyo. They don't realize that it came from this book that has become ubiquitous. It's my favorite map that I did myself. I've been interested in maps, obviously. A map is a pattern made understandable. We are in the pattern business. Pattern recognition is our creativity. And that's why that's the founding principle of how I look at information architecture, a term I thought up for the AIA in '76. This is not in a dictionary, but I made it look like it was in a dictionary. The individual who organizes the patterns inherent in data, making the complex clear. A person who creates the structure or map of information, which allows others to find their personal paths to knowledge. The emerging 21st century professional occupation addressing the needs of the age focus upon clarity, human understanding, and the science of the organization of information. People have different definitions of what information architecture is, and I really don't care. But I do call myself an information architect, but I don't have it on my card.
It's very hard to explain what Richard does. It is especially hard for Richard to explain what Richard does. All of his training as an architect, as a cartographer, as a graphic designer, as an entrepreneur, as a publisher, and as an author, has all been about a passion for making information understandable.
You only understand something relative to something you understand. If I tell you an acre is the size of a football field, just shy of the end zones, the next time you see the word acre, the next time you watch a football game, you'll think, oh, the football field is about the size of an acre. Huh, that's what an acre is. If I tell you it's 43,560 square feet, you won't remember it. I'm interested in the transformation of big data into big understanding.
Today we celebrate a garden of pure ideology.
1984, Steve Jobs comes out with the Macintosh, the famous ad at the Super Bowl, shown only once.
On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh.
An incredible year. I started TED.
If you understand TED, you understand what Richard does.
The idea of TED was convergence. It was the observation that the technology business and the design professions and the entertainment industry were all converging into one thing.
Many people saw these big computers and got a kick out of working with them, interacting with them. The idea that that would become an information tool wasn't something that was originally recognized.
TED. It was a friendly way of talking to information and understanding. It went into our hearts because it was more human, more friendly. It started us on the path of having a conversation with understanding. I'll tell you how it worked. In the beginning of the TED conference every year, I would say, welcome to the dinner party I always wanted to have but couldn't. I sold it and did the last TED in 2002. I mean, I sold it because I was realizing I was just incrementally doing it a little bit better every year, and that just wasn't enough for me. I think I look older there. I look younger now.
I agree.
Sure, there was some regret, yeah. But it would have been more regret if I kept on doing it. That's my backyard. I didn't test my mettle. I wasn't terrified.
It's true.
When you lose your terror and go to your comfort, there's something that, you don't have enough years to live that you should do that. Everything I say is going to go out of style. There's nothing I say that's going to last. There will be no Richard Saul Wurman legacy. But going into knowing you don't have a legacy really makes you just do good work. I'm consistent, if nothing else. But if nothing else, maybe I'm just Johnny One Note. Maybe I'm doing the same thing over and over and over again that looks different because the subjects are different, that looks different because the ideas are different, but it's actually the same thing. How do I strive to understand what it's like not to understand? So the task that we have at hand is this task of turning this non-information, the stuff that's around us, the data, into an easier way to inform. And that's the journey we're still on. Thank you very much, Mr. Good.
Oh, yeah.
That was terrific. That was really good. Thank you. Thank you. That hasn't been shown. That was shown, I think, once or twice. You can't find it. It was done. There's a conference that I was invited to last fall called the Nantucket Project. It's a very good conference. People in Nantucket have deep pockets, and it was a good meeting. And these people, Tom of Tom and Tom, they invented Nantucket Nectars. He has a documentary company, and he wanted to do a film of me, so he came. They shot it for 3 days. I had nothing to do with how it was done, and I never saw it. And I come to the conference to give a speech, and I said, I want to see the film before. You're going to show the film? Yeah, I want to see it before you show it. He didn't show it to me. And so I'm sitting up there, and they show that opening beginning where I'm just obnoxious in the beginning. And I thought, oh, my God, I wanted to get under my seat. But then I'm sort of self-deprecating in the rest of it, so it's not so bad. But He just did it and showed it, and then I went up and gave a speech. And I never would have done a film like that. I realize how complicated it is to do documentaries. We were talking about that before. I've been watching Alex Gibney's documentaries he did on Lance Armstrong, and then the one on Scientology, and then the last two 2-hour shows on Sinatra that just ran recently. And they're all done by Alex Gibney, and I was thinking, because of this film, of how hard, how complicated it is to a documentary and slice ideas and things together with visual images and voiceover and try to keep it coherent. That's really challenging. I don't think I would be able to do that. One thing I want to do, which takes about 30 seconds, and then I'm going to ask you some questions. I'm going to recite to you the beginning of my new book, which is very short, but it gives you an idea. The first chapter is called Whales. I just landed in London Heathrow, and I was jet lagged and came into the city. And as I crossed the street, I looked the wrong way, and I almost get run over by a bus. And I realized that the bus is the size of a blue whale's tongue, but then I'm exaggerating because it was a double-decker bus. And as the bus comes to a screeching stop, it gets hit in its rear by a Volkswagen Beetle, which is the size of a blue whale's heart, and was built by Hitler as Germany's people's car in 1935, the year I was born. And that's the beginning of the book. And in that convoluted story are the beginnings of the way we understand. We understand through exaggeration, we understand through time, understand through comparison to other things, through stories, through history, through color, through size, through the curiosity of where it takes you when you start talking about whales and tongues. And you start thinking, well, I don't know very much about the blue whale. I know about the Moby Dick whale. And you can get into the Moby Dick whale, and which is the sperm whale, which it doesn't named after sperm in the whale. It's named after an oil it has in its head. And its head is a third the size of its body. And it grows, some of them, ambergris, in its second stomach, has a very bad digestive system, and it floats up. It's a black substance, which is more valuable per ounce than gold, and can be used, stinks like hell, can be used in the most expensive perfumes, and on and on and on. You can go from that little story anywhere you want. So, what do you say?
He said we have about 5 minutes.
Then we have to ask everybody to leave. Go have lunch. Is that okay?
So you want me to just stand here for 5 minutes?
Yeah.
No, I want
to say a few things.
I want you to. She's moving back to Washington.
I am moving back to Washington, and I'm reminded and I'm sure everyone who's visiting realizes after this weekend what a vibrant, wonderful place this is for media people, and I'm really excited about it. About 15 months ago, I started my own company, so I had to do a lot of thinking about what I wanted and didn't want, and I learned a lot of lessons from knowing Richard for, I don't know, a dozen years or something. More. Yeah, maybe more. And a few of those things I think are maybe good for this crowd. One of those things is that we should all take more ownership of our own time and how we spend it. So, I found over the years, I guess almost 30 years at media companies, we have to do a lot of things maybe we don't want to do, or there's some things that just need to be done, but I'm trying to be really deliberate, in how I'm spending my time. I'm turning 50 this year, so I feel kind of at a crossroads, and one thing I'm trying to be really conscious is, how am I spending my time and who am I working with? Which leads me to the second thing. Like, sometimes we're put in situations where, and we, I guess, learn and grow from those situations, but I realized I don't really have to work with anyone I don't want to. And that's a really, really, interesting thing to embrace. And as Richard does and has done his whole career, seeking out people that you can learn from and that know more about subjects than you do and trying to work with them. I'm doing a lot of work with musicians right now, and it's just extremely interesting and a really different way of approaching my work. And then the third thing is really along those lines, if you work for a company, and in my last role I was a vice president of a pretty big media company, and I think we find that sometimes we put ourselves in boxes, right? Other people want to put us in boxes. A lot of people want to have a job description. And one thing I learned from Richard was you can throw all that away. Like, you don't have to limit yourself to one platform, one discipline, one subject area, one set of tools. You can just do what you want to do and make good stuff. And if you spend enough time learning how to do that, you're going to probably succeed. And you'll fail, and then you'll succeed at some point, right? So those are things I just wanted to kind of mention, because I've been thinking a lot about that as I hear him talk. And one of the things that's always really inspiring about Richard is that he's completely led by his curiosity and his heart, but then he puts in the work, you know, to make wonderful things happen for himself and other people, even if his first motivation was just to learn about something. So that's what I wanted to say. What did you want to ask me, Richard?
I was going to ask you, so you're coming to Washington, what are you going to do here? But you told us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to make films. I'm probably going to design some publications, create some good stories, probably work with quite a few people in this room, I'm hoping.
We met through maps. We met through
We did.
National Geographic, and she was in the map department.
We did. So Richard and I did a lot of the early conceptual thinking around his whole project 1920-21 about mega cities, and we talked a lot about what we don't know and why it's hard for us to understand one thing unless you understand it relative to something you understand, as he said earlier. So we spent a lot of time talking about what kinds of data you would like to be able to access consistent across different locations. And I really urge you all to go to the site that he mentioned, because it's really fun to be able to compare like all the open space of Paris, you know, with Tokyo, with Madrid, or look at the transportation systems, or look at the population density. It's a really interesting thing, and there's some serendipity now because it's an open project, so the cities that want to participate, so you're getting kind of a really interesting mix of places that
The city's regularly added, so
Yeah.
you know, the number will keep on going up.
yeah, so,
I have a little message for you as you go to lunch. And this is a Steve Wright joke. Steve Wright is a fantastic comedian. And when you think of where you want to go for lunch today, remember this one-liner of Steve Wright. Everything is in walking distance if you have enough time. That's it.